Hi, my name is Chris Melnick, and I'm a realtor in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Today, I'm going to answer the question, why don't builders build smaller homes, like detached homes, the size of condos or tiny homes, if you will? The short answer is because the current way they're built is too expensive. Now, some of you may have heard from me or other sources that have approximated new construction prices at $225 to $250 per square foot for just the structure, and said, well, why don't I just build a 500 square foot tiny home for $125,000? I would buy that. Tiny homes can be so cool. But that's not quite how it works. That approximation relates to minimum sizes, and that's the reason that I'll add that new construction prices start at approximately $225 to $250 per square foot for structures around 2,000 square feet. And it's more money per square foot for a smaller structure and less money per square foot for a bigger one. And the reason is because of the fixed or semi-fixed costs. By this, I mean the costs that don't really change or change by a marginal amount depending on how big the structure is. This would be like the water and sewer hookup, the electrical service, the driveway, the landscaping, and the permitting fees. This adds up to a lot. On top of that, you have costs that don't change too much relative to the size of the structure. For example, when running the electrical systems in a home, some of the most expensive components are the panel and the thicker gauges of wire needing to go to the kitchen, the laundry room, and the mechanical room. Bedrooms only need 14.2, which is relatively cheap. So adding wiring for the extra bedroom is relatively cheap once you already have everything in place. In the same vein, adding extra bedrooms or enlarging rooms has a minimal effect on increasing the need for more plumbing components. You may have slightly longer runs or a larger hot water tank, but those costs are marginal. On all other work, there's also the bulk discount. Anyone who shops at Costco knows what I'm talking about. The more you buy, the cheaper the unit cost is. This is because every tradesperson has to come to site, spend time setting up, and then cleaning up when they're done. That's part of the job. They would rather do a bigger job than a smaller job because they can actually get more done while there. So they'll give you a better price. And so far, this has only been talking about structure costs. But of course, you need land, and that's a very expensive fixed cost too. Now let's look at a real-world example of a tiny home community in the works. This was announced last October by the government in partnership with local experienced builders. And by the way, this is not a criticism of the builders involved or the government. This is just to illustrate my point how expensive things can be at this scale. Now, for $9.4 million, they plan to build 52 tiny homes, and it appears 2 larger buildings. Now, from what they tell us, 10 of these will be double occupancy. They're being given the land for free, so these costs are just for the structures and infrastructure. Now, they don't give us the dimensions, but from the renderings, we can extrapolate some figures. By this, I mean that we know that the doors they use are probably standard, so 80 inches tall. And if we know what 80 inches is on the picture, we can use it as a scale to figure out what the other dimensions, like the width and the height of the front are. And once we find the width of the front, we can use it to compare the proportions of the side in this other picture. Now, the resolution isn't the greatest, but from my math, that gives me outside dimensions of 9.5 feet by 14.5 feet. And since they probably just used easy whole numbers, I think the dimensions are closer to 10 by 15 feet or 150 square foot per single occupancy structure. Now, I don't know exactly how big the double occupancy unit is, but to be very generous, let's just say it's twice as big, or 300 square feet. If you crunch the numbers, that adds up to 9,300 square feet for all of the tiny home structures. Now, there are 2 other bigger buildings there that I assume are community buildings. We'll just guesstimate that the big one costs $1 million and the smaller one is $500,000. This could very well be on the high side. For our estimate for the cost of the tiny homes, that leaves us with $7.9 million. Now, $7.9 million divided by 9,300 square feet is about $850 per square foot for just the structure. That is a lot more than $225 to $250 per square foot. Can homes be built cheaper? Probably. But this is just to give you an idea of real-world costs that were deemed fair by the government. When you start building small, you're effectively concentrating the most expensive mandatory components of a home in a small footprint, which increases the cost per square foot. And since most people wouldn't want to be paying over $127,000 for a 150 square foot structure with no land, builders aren't building them. And decent land, even 30 minutes from the city, starts at about $75,000. So it would cost around $200,000 for a structure, a similar size to most master bedrooms. And as a point of reference, for about $300,000, you can start getting into older 800 square foot 2-bedroom resale condos here. As a disclaimer, all of my numbers were based on the renderings. They could very well be different from reality. That said, I know that the government is very careful with knowing exactly what they're paying for to be responsible to taxpayers. So I have a reasonable level of confidence that these renderings are accurate. Well, I hope that answers your question. Now, if you're thinking about buying or selling, feel free to contact me. My contact information is in the description. Goodbye.